Lesson 33. The Eisteddfod. Extracts from Jan's diary. I think the last 2 days have been 2 of the most interesting days I have ever spent. I have seen a Welsh Eisteddfod, a national gathering of an enormous crowd of people devoted to music and poetry. The Welsh are a nation of singers. Wherever you get a crowd of Welshmen, whether they're down the mine, in the factory or waiting on the platform for a train, they just can't help bursting into song. Anyone, said Mr. Evans, who has heard a crowd of 50,000 Welshmen before a rugby match at Cardiff singing Land of My Fathers, will never forget it. You could hardly find a town in Wales, however small, that hasn't a choir. Its conductor isn't a trained musician, he may be only a miner, an agricultural laborer or Jones the milk, but the university lecturer or the doctor's daughter will be happy to work under his leadership. The choir will gather in the little chapel almost every night for practice, for they are preparing for the Eisteddfod, and the pieces set for competition. This year they are 2 difficult works by Bach and Brahms, need a lot of practice to bring them to perfection. I should think the Welsh are the only people in the world whose only national festival is devoted to music and poetry. For that is what an Eisteddfod is. Their national Eisteddfod is held every year in the first week in August, 1 year in the north of Wales, the next year in the south, and competitors come from all parts of Wales to compete in it. For 12 months thousands of Welsh people have been practicing music. The shepherd on the hills, the teacher in the grammar school have been working at the poem that they hope will win the prize. A housewife may be a harpist, a parson a poet. During the week of the competition about 100,000 people will travel to the Eisteddfod to hear the competitors and listen to the judges' decisions. The Eisteddfod is one of the oldest of all Welsh customs, the first one of which we have any record was held in the 6th century, and as early as AD 940 the prize for the winning bard, poet, was a chair or throne. And that is still the prize today. In medieval times every chieftain used to keep a bard, and there were other bards who wandered about the country singing songs and making poems. There must have been quite a lot of poor singing and bad poetry then, for Queen Elizabeth I ordered an Eisteddfod to be held every year with the object of raising the standard of music and getting rid of the lazy, worthless bards. By a stroke of great good fortune for Frida and me, the Eisteddfod was due to take place this year at Carnarvon at the very time that we were in North Wales. Mr. Evans has a brother who lives in Carnarvon and he invited us to stay at his house the night before the meeting opened, for, said Mr. Evans, we must be up early tomorrow morning to see the gorsedd. What's a gorsedd? I asked. You'll see, tomorrow, he replied. So, early next morning we all went to a large grassy field or park just outside Carnarvon. The streets were busy with people and in the field there was a large crowd gathered round a circle of big stones, with an altar stone in the middle, like Stonehenge. Soon I could see a procession coming slowly towards the stone circle. And very colorful it was. First there were 4 men carrying on their shoulders a kind of platform on which was an enormous golden horn. That's the Hurla's horn, the horn of plenty, said Mr. Evans. It's kept all the year in the museum at Cardiff. Behind them walked men in white robes. The Druids, said Mr. Evans. Druidism was a culture and a religion that existed in Wales in the very earliest times. Caesar and Tacitus wrote about the Druids against whom the Romans fought in Anglesey. They were white-robed priests and lawgivers who held their meetings in the woods where they offered up human sacrifices. One of their ceremonies was the cutting of the mistletoe that grew on the oak trees in Anglesey, a custom that we still remember at Christmas time. At one time it was believed that the Druids had built the great stone circles that are still seen at Stonehenge and in other parts of Britain, but those stone circles are much older than that. By this time the Druids had come to the stone circle and now stood in a double row before the altar stone. And then, between the lines of Druids came a man dressed in green and carrying a long 2-handed sword. Behind him came a tall, bearded man in white, and wearing a great breastplate. The chief Druid, whispered Mr. Evans. A friendly Welshman next to me pointed to one of the bards. That's Cadwallo, he said, a great poet. I looked at the man he had pointed to and said to Mr. Evans, but that's the Reverend J.A. Hughes, our parson at Capel Curig, isn't it? Yes, he said, but all our great poets are known by their bardic names. Then the ceremony of the gorsedd began. The sword-bearer drew the great sword from its sheath. One by one the druids came forward and put their hands on it. Then the chief druid called out in a loud voice something in Welsh. He says, "Is it peace?" whispered Mr. Evans. The chief druid shouted this 3 times, and each time the crowd called back, "It is peace." A woman dressed in red and carrying the golden horn came forward to the chief druid. He touched it, and she slowly walked back to her place. Then the chief druid stepped onto the altar stone and made a long speech in Welsh. I didn't understand a word of it, but the audience loved it. Other bards spoke and the crowd enjoyed every minute of it. Then there were prayers in Welsh and, at the end of this, new bards, men and women dressed in blue robes, were brought before the chief druid. These were people who had done some particularly good work in poetry or music. The chief druid shook hands with them and gave each of them a bardic name by which he would be called at all future gorseds. Then the procession formed again, the great sword was held high above the heads of the people, bards and druids moved off slowly, the crowds began to fade away, the Eisteddfod was opened. In the afternoon we went to the Eisteddfod. An enormous tent had been put up. "It holds 10,000 people," said Mr. Evans, "that's as many as the Albert Hall in London holds." There were thousands of people there, going into the Eisteddfod tent or sitting on the grass outside. We took our places inside. The 3 best competitors in each event had been chosen in preliminary trials, and now soloists and choirs came in turn to sing, to play the harp, to speak their poems, while the judges listened and, at the end of the event, announced the winner and gave reasons for their choice. Though I enjoyed the music, I couldn't understand anything else, for at the Eisteddfod everything is done in Welsh. One of the most interesting competitions, at least for those who understand Welsh, is Penillion singing. In this the competitors are accompanied on the harp and have to make up their song as they go along. The opening of the Eisteddfod. But the great event comes at the end. This is the choosing of the crowned bard, the greatest honor the Eisteddfod can give. For a whole year bards have been working at a poem on a subject that has been set by the judges. These poems have been sent to the judges before the Eisteddfod starts and have been carefully studied by the Council of the Druids. I looked round the scene. The tent was now crowded, every seat was taken and people were standing in the passageways. There was a tremendous feeling of excitement and expectation. The trumpets sounded, and in procession came all the bards that we had seen at the gorsedd. The chief druid took his seat in the center. Again the trumpets sounded, and in a silence that you could almost feel, the chief druid said, "The crown has been won by." There was a pause, Cadwallo. There was a great burst of cheering. The audience were on their feet. Mr. Evans was jumping about with excitement and joy. The crown had been won by Mr. Hughes, the parson of his village. I could see Mr. Hughes at the back of the tent. 2 bards from the platform went towards him and, one at each side of him, brought him to the platform. He was told to sit on a finely carved chair of druid's oak that is to be his prize. They put a robe of purple on him with white fur at the edges. The great sword was held over him, and the chief druid came forward and put a crown on his head. The chief bard read the poem that Cadwallo had written and, though of course I couldn't understand it, the crowd clearly agreed completely with the druid's decision. So the Eisteddfod ended. And our holiday in Wales has ended, too. Tomorrow we leave for London and work again. Frida has bought a little silver Welsh harp to wear as a brooch, you'll see it when she gets back. Exercises. Exercise 1. Use the following words and phrases in sentences. Devoted to, was due to, tent. Mine, noun, procession, trial. Rugby match, shoulders, accompany. Agricultural, horn, tremendous. Purple, trumpet, fur. Under his leadership, laborer, human sacrifices. row, noun, competition, every minute of it. At the edges, perfection, worthless. At each side of him, shepherd, robe. Parson, fade away, brooch. Exercise 2. Say in 1 or 2 sentences what the following do. 1. A miner, 2. A housewife, 3. An agricultural laborer, 4. A parson, 5. A doctor, 6. A schoolmaster, 7. A postman, 8. A milkman, 9. A shepherd, 10. A porter. Exercise 3. Answer these questions. 1. Are the conductors of Welsden choirs usually trained musicians? 2. What is an Eisteddfod? 3. What sort of people take part in an Eisteddfod? 4. Where do they come from? 5. When was the first Eisteddfod held? 6. Where and when does the Eisteddfod take place nowadays? 7. Do you think the Druids built Stonehenge? 8. Where is the Hurla's horn usually kept? 9. Why did Queen Elizabeth I order an Eisteddfod to be held? 10. Why didn't Jan understand anything at the Eisteddfod? 11. Who was Cadwallo? 12. What Christmas custom began with the Druids? 13. What do you think is the Welsh national musical instrument? Frida might help you. 14. Why are the poems sent to the judges before the Eisteddfod begins? 15. What happens to the winner of the crown? Exercise 4. Choose the correct word from those in brackets. 1. The Welsh are a nation of sailors, singers, servants. 2. A choir sees, accompanies, gathers, in the chapel for poetry, a rugby match, practice. 3. Anyone who has hearing, hear, heard, a crowd of 50,000 singing at Cardiff will never forgotten, forget, remember it. 4. The Welsh are the only whole, all people in the world who, whom, whose only national festival is devoted by, from, to music and poetry. 5. 1 year it is, in, near, to, the north of Wales, the first, second, next, year in the south. 6. A housewife should, may, will, be a harpist. 7. I don't forget, understand, understood, a word of Welsh, but they, bards, audiences, chief druid, love it all. 8. The competitors have to make, made, take, up their song as they went, go, sing, along. 9. Jan can see, saw, seeing, a row, procession, coming towards him. 10. Frida is bought, brought, buying, a small brooch for her, herself, she. Exercise 5. Rewrite the sentences of number 4 in the past tense. Exercise 6. The following is half a conversation between Jan and Frida in the evening of the day at the Eisteddfod. Can you put in what Jan might have said to Frida? Frida, that was a lovely day, wasn't it? Jan. Frida, yes, if we'd been a week later we shouldn't have seen it at all. Jan. Frida, I thought it was when Cadwallo won, and everybody cheered. What did you think was the best moment? Jan. Frida, yes, I thought that was good too. I liked the part when the procession came. Jan. Frida, and it was also most impressive. Jan. Frida, I'm glad I didn't live in those days when they had human sacrifices. I say, Jan, what's the time? Jan. Frida, oh, good, let's go for a walk along the valley before supper. Jan. Composition exercises. 1. Describe what happens at the Gorset. 2. Describe any festival of music that is held in your country. 3. Write a letter that Frida might have written to Mr. Priestley describing the crowning of the bard. 4. Queen Elizabeth I wanted to get rid of worthless poets. Do you think poets today are useful and give pleasure, or do you think we don't need them? Give reasons for your answer. Dear friends, thank you for watching our channel and learning English with us. Subscribe. And we wish you great luck in achieving your goals.